pull on that lever.
You mean like this?
In 1993, comedy legend Mel Brooks took aim at one of the most famous heroes in history, and instead of hitting a bullseye, he hit us right in the funny bone. Robin Hood. Men in Tights wasn't just another parody. It was a lightning-fast storm of sight gags, one-liners, and musical numbers, all wrapped inside a surprisingly well-made adventure movie. But the real comedy? It didn't just happen on screen. Behind the scenes, there were close calls, unexpected casting choices, strange coincidences, and enough absurd moments to fill an entire movie of their own. Today, we're counting down 20 incredible behind-the-scenes facts, plus a bonus that will change the way you see Men in Tights forever. And trust me, some of these will make you laugh, some will make you raise an eyebrow, and one or two might make you say, there's no way that actually happened. Let's start at the very beginning, with a story that starts not on a film set, but in a dentist's chair. Here are 20 jaw-dropping facts you've probably never heard. Let's saddle up.
Number 1.
It's hard to believe, but the spark for Robin Hood, Men in Tights, didn't come from Hollywood. It came from a frustrated teenager named Geordie Chandler. In 1991, Kevin Costner starred in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, a massive hit, famous for its sweeping action scenes, dramatic tone, and, well, not-so-English accent from the lead. Geordie went to see it in theaters and walked out annoyed. Too serious, he thought. No humor. And to him, that accent from Robin Hood felt completely out of place. Now, here's where fate steps in. Geordie's dad was the dentist for none other than Mel Brooks. During a routine dental visit, Geordie's dad mentioned his son's rant about Prince of Thieves, and Mel, who always had his ear to the ground for what audiences were thinking, immediately saw potential. If a teenager was this bothered, there were probably millions of other people ready for a Robin Hood that didn't take itself so seriously. That offhand conversation planted the seed for what would become one of the most quotable parodies of the 90s. But when Mel Brooks decided to make his Robin Hood, he had one rule. Even if it was going to be a comedy, it had to look like a real swashbuckling adventure, which is how the cast found themselves at sword fighting boot camp.
Number 2.
You'd think for a parody movie, the sword fights would be thrown together with quick rehearsal and a few slapstick moves. Not here. Before filming even began, Brooks sent the cast through professional swashbuckler training. Carrie Elwise, who played Robin Hood, already had experience from The Princess Bride. He knew how to fence, how to move, and how to make swordplay look effortless. But for others, like Dave Chappelle, Eric Allen Kramer, and Mark Blankfield, this was completely new territory. The fight choreographers drilled them in footwork, blade handling, timing, and even flourishes. The goal? Make every duel look good enough to belong in a serious period film, so that when the jokes happened, they were even funnier. That's the secret to good parody. You earn the laughs by making the world believable first. Speaking of believable, when Mel Brooks offered the lead role to Carrie Elwise, things got off to a very awkward start because Elwise accidentally hung up on him.
Number 3.
When Mel Brooks called Carrie Elwise to offer him the role of Robin Hood, the timing couldn't have been worse. Elwise was recovering from a serious back injury and wasn't actively looking for new projects. So when the phone rang and a voice on the other end said, "Hello, this is Mel Brooks," he thought, yeah, right. He assumed it was a prank from a friend and hung up. A few minutes later, the phone rang again. But this time, the caller ID showed a major Hollywood studio. It really was Mel Brooks. Instead of being offended, Brooks thought it was hilarious. In fact, he convinced him Elwise was perfect for the role. Quick-witted, self-aware, and not afraid to play things a little differently. That happy accident sealed the deal, and Elwise signed on. And Elwise wasn't the only future star to get their big break here, because this film also introduced the world to a then unknown young comedian named Dave Chappelle.
Number 4.
In 1993, most of the world had never heard the name Dave Chappelle. He was a 19-year-old stand-up comic working small clubs, trying to make rent. One night, Mel Brooks happened to catch his performance, and Brooks, who had a sixth sense for spotting talent, saw something special. A sharp wit, a unique voice, and a fearless way of delivering punchlines. Brooks offered Chappelle the role of Achu, Robin Hood's loyal companion. This wasn't just a supporting role, it was a scene-stealing one. And here's the thing, Chappelle didn't just act in the film, he helped shape some of his own lines. His timing, his delivery, and even the subtle modern references gave the movie an extra layer of humor that still feels fresh today. For Chappelle, Men in Tights was a launch pad. Within a decade, he'd be one of the most famous comedians in the world. But here, in his first film, you can already see the spark that would make him a star. And speaking of stars, the film almost had a very different leading lady. In fact, the role of Maid Marion nearly went to someone who was already a household name.
Number 5.
In Men in Tights, Maid Marion is played by Amy Yasbeck, who brought just the right mix of elegance and comedic charm. But before Yasbeck landed the role, Mel Brooks had considered several other actresses, including a few from hit TV shows of the early 90s. One strong contender was Terry Hatcher, fresh off her breakout on Lois and Clark. Ultimately, Brooks chose Yasbeck for one simple reason. She could balance playing a sincere romantic lead and handle slapstick without breaking the scene. Yasbeck also had perfect chemistry with Carrie Elwise, something Brooks valued more than name recognition. In a comedy, timing is everything, and Yasbeck could land a punchline just as gracefully as she delivered a heartfelt line. And while we're talking about unexpected choices, one of the funniest running gags in the movie actually came from a real-life accident involving Robin Hood's costume.
Number 6.
During early costume fittings, Carrie Elwise noticed something odd. The tights chosen for his Robin Hood outfit were just a bit too snug. In most productions, they would have swapped themed out for something more comfortable. But Mel Brooks saw an opportunity. He turned the slightly awkward fit into a visual gag, one that inspired the now famous Men in Tights musical number. What started as a wardrobe hiccup became one of the film's most memorable scenes.
I was that close. I touched it.
With the entire cast leaning into the joke. Brooks always said, if something goes wrong and it makes you laugh, keep it. That philosophy turned a potential problem into comedy gold. But not every moment of filming was fun and games, especially when the production ran into a problem with one of the biggest set pieces in the entire movie.
Number 7.
One of the funniest moments in Men in Tights is the bridge duel between Robin Hood and Little John, played by Eric Allen Kramer. The scene was supposed to be simple, a comedic fight over who gets to cross, complete with exaggerated staff fighting and plenty of falls into the water. But on filming day, the set designers realized they'd made a mistake. The water below was freezing. This meant every time the actors fell in, they were plunging into near icy conditions. Carrie Elwise later joked that you can see his genuine shock on screen when he hits the water the first time. Between takes, the cast huddled under blankets with hot tea just to keep going. In the final cut, the discomfort only adds to the humor. The splashes, the shivers, the exaggerated reactions, all totally real. And as if cold water wasn't enough, the cast also had to deal with something even trickier, a live animal that didn't exactly follow the script.
Number 8.
They say never work with animals if you want things to go smoothly.
Your Majesty, come with me and I will show you something that will make you very happy.
And Men in Tights proved why. For Robin Hood's grand entrances, Carrie Elwise was supposed to ride in on a majestic white horse. The animal was gorgeous, well-trained, and completely uninterested in sticking to the script. During one take, as Elwise delivered his heroic line, the horse suddenly decided to wander toward craft services, right out of frame. The crew tried to keep straight faces, but you can see in some shots that Elwise is subtly tugging on the kidneys to get his co-star back in position. Mel Brooks didn't cut around it. He loved the slight unpredictability because it made Robin Hood feel more human, and it gave the audience a little subconscious laugh. Brooks's philosophy was simple. If the audience catches something real happening on screen, it draws them in. And speaking of drawing the audience in, the movie's title song almost sounded very different, because it was originally pitched as a rap.
Number 9.
The Men in Tights title song is one of the film's most unforgettable moments, a medieval-style musical number that leans fully into the absurdity of the premise. But here's the wild part. One of the earliest pitches was to make it a full-blown rap song. In the early 90s, rap was exploding into mainstream pop culture, and some of the younger crew members thought it would be hilarious to have Robin Hood and his merry men drop rhymes about stealing from the rich. Mel Brooks listened to the demo, and while he admitted it was funny, he felt it might date the movie too quickly. Instead, he opted for a more timeless, theatrical style. something that would still feel fresh decades later. Still, Brooks sneaked in a few modern rhythms and dance moves into the final choreography as a wink to the original idea. And the rap idea wasn't the only thing from the 90s that almost crept in, because one scene came this close to featuring a cameo from a famous pop star.
Number 10.
While casting was underway, rumors swirled that Mel Brooks might sneak in a cameo from a then chart-topping pop sensation, Madonna. At the time, she was experimenting with acting and had expressed interest in working with Brooks on something comedic. One idea was to have her appear in the background of the royal court scenes as a lady of the court who occasionally broke into song. Scheduling conflicts killed the plan, but Brooks loved the idea of surprise cameos so much that he found ways to include smaller ones from his own circle of friends. And one of those friends played a role you probably didn't even realize was Mel Brooks himself.
Number 11.
If you've seen Men in Tights, component placement, you've seen Mel Brooks on screen.
I take your little thing, I put it into this little hole here, and...
Even if you didn't recognize him, Brooks plays Rabbi Tuckman, the wisecracking holy man who sells circumcision services out of a roadside cart. The character was written as a parody of Friar Tuck, but with Brooks's signature twist, a mix of old-world charm, relentless wordplay, and absurd props. Brooks insisted on doing the role himself because, as he put it, nobody else would agree to look this ridiculous for the joke. The result? One of the most quotable cameos in his entire career. But not all the cameos were funny. One was actually a heartfelt tribute to a dear friend.
Number 12.
In one castle scene, a banner in the background features a coat of arms with initials that don't seem to match any character in the movie. That's because it wasn't for a character at all. It was a quiet tribute from Brooks to a late friend from his early comedy days. Brooks never advertised it, never explained it in interviews, and only mentioned it years later during a DVD commentary. For him, it was a way to keep his friend's name in the middle of the action. And while Brooks was sentimental at times, he was also incredibly practical, especially when it came to saving the budget with one bizarre solution.
Number 13.
The grand castle you see throughout the movie looks like a fully built medieval fortress. In reality, it was a clever mix of one real location and a lot of matte paintings. The crew shot the main exterior at an actual historical site, but all the sweeping overhead shot, completely fake. Painted on glass by special effects artists. This trick saved thousands of dollars, letting Brooks spend more of the budget on costumes, set dressing, and the fight choreography that made the movie feel authentic. And speaking of costumes, one prop nearly caused a full day of delays because of bubbles.
Number 14.
In the famous scene where Maid Marion relaxes in a giant bath, the crew used a foam machine to create a bubbly surface. The problem? The machine went haywire, producing so much foam that it started spilling over the edge of the tub and flooding the floor. Between takes, crew members scrambled with buckets and towels to keep the set from becoming a slip hazard. The actors couldn't stop laughing, which only slowed things down more. Brooks eventually joked, "If this movie tanks, we can always sell bubble baths." And while the bubbles were chaotic, nothing compared to the chaos of shooting the final archery contest.
Number 15.
The archery contest near the end of the film was one of the largest set pieces, requiring dozens of extras, props, and perfectly timed stunts. But on the first day of filming it, the wind decided to join the cast. Strong gusts kept knocking over banners, sending hay bales tumbling, and even redirecting some of the prop arrows mid-flight. The crew had to shoot most of the wide shots in short bursts between takes, and some of the extras ended up holding props steady just out of frame. And yet, despite all the chaos, the crew still found time to sneak in one of the film's weirdest visual jokes, one most people miss entirely.
Number 16.
In one shot during the archery contest, if you look at the far right of the crowd, you'll spot an extra wearing sunglasses and sipping from a fast food cup. Completely out of place for medieval England, of course. And that was the point. Brooks loved planting anachronisms in his films, and this was one of the more subtle ones. He never draws attention to it. So when someone spots it, it feels like an inside joke. And speaking of inside jokes, one entire scene is actually a parody of another movie Brooks made years earlier.
Number 17.
When Robin Hood crashes through a window into Maid Marion's room, it's shot almost exactly like a scene from Brooks's earlier film, The 12 Chairs. The framing, the music cue, even the way Robin lands, all intentional. Brooks loved referencing his own work, knowing that fans who'd been with him for decades would recognize the callbacks. It was his way of rewarding loyal audiences. But not all callbacks were to Brooks's own films. One came straight from the history of Robin Hood itself.
Number 18.
The design of Robin Hood's hat in the film is based on an actual illustration from a 14th century manuscript, one of the oldest known depictions of the legendary outlaw. Costume designer Deborah Nadoolman Landis insisted on including it as a nod to the real history, even in a parody. It's a small detail, but it grounds the character in a surprising bit of authenticity. And speaking of authenticity, one prop was so authentic that it nearly injured the lead actor.
Number 19.
Most of the swords in Men in Tights were lightweight aluminum or rubber, designed for safety. But for certain close-ups, the crew used a real steel sword for accuracy. During one rehearsal, Carrie Elwise accidentally swung the real sword a little too close to a crew member. No one was hurt, but from that moment on, Brooks insisted the real blade only be used when absolutely necessary. And while the sword was a close call, the biggest danger on set wasn't from weapons at all, it was from laughter.
Number 20.
There's a scene where Achu delivers a deadpan one-liner to Robin Hood, and Robin is supposed to reply with equal seriousness. But every time Dave Chappelle delivered the line, Carrie Elwise broke into uncontrollable laughter. After more than a dozen failed takes, they finally filmed the scene with Elwise biting the inside of his cheek to keep from smiling. If you watch closely in the final cut, you can still see the corner of his mouth twitching. And as funny as that was, there's one final fact that might change the way you see Men in Tights forever.
Bonus.
Every great movie leaves the audience with a final laugh, a final thrill, or a final moment that cements it in memory. But Men in Tights almost ended with a scene so outrageous that it would have been one of the most surreal finales in comedy history. In Mel Brooks's first draft, the story didn't wrap with Robin Hood and Maid Marion's big wedding. Instead, after defeating the Sheriff of Rottingham, the merry men were going to accidentally fire themselves out of a giant medieval catapult. Here's how it was supposed to go. During the celebration feast, one of the merry men discovers a massive siege weapon outside the castle. They're told it's for defense only, but in true Brooks fashion, curiosity gets the better of them. A few ridiculous mishaps later, the entire gang, Robin, Marion, Achu, Blinken, and even Rabbi Tuckman are crammed onto the catapult, still holding mugs of mead. Suddenly, whoosh, they're launched into the sky, and instead of coming down in medieval England, the camera cuts to bright neon lights, slot machines, and Elvis impersonators. The merry men land, unharmed, right in the middle of a Las Vegas stage show. The audience in the Vegas theater thinks it's part of the act, and they start cheering wildly as the merry men try to figure out where they are. Brooks planned for the final gag to be Achu walking up to the Elvis impersonator and saying, "Hey, I've seen this guy before, back in Sherwood Forest." Why Las Vegas? Brooks loved ending his comedies with sudden, absurd anachronisms, little jolts that remind you the whole thing was a playful fantasy. He thought Vegas was the ultimate symbol of over-the-top spectacle and excess, which fit the film's tone perfectly. So why didn't we see it? Two reasons. First, it would have required expensive sets, special effects, and possibly licensing to use real Vegas show imagery. Second, Brooks realized that while the gag was hilarious in theory, it distracted from the romance between Robin and Marion, and the test audience loved that wedding ending. But even though it was scrapped, you can still see traces of the idea in the final wedding scene. The exaggerated celebration, the out-of-time jokes, and the way the characters wink at the audience. All of it came from that original concept. And here's the kicker. In a 2014 Q&A, Brooks revealed he still has the full Catapult to Vegas ending written in his archives, and joked that one day, he might film it as a short just for fun. Imagine that. Robin Hood and his merry men in Vegas. Now that's a sequel we never knew we needed. And if you enjoyed diving into these behind-the-scenes stories as much as I enjoyed sharing them, let's keep this adventure going. Hit that like button so more Robin Hood fans can find this video, tap subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive, and drop a comment telling me your favorite Men in Tights moment, or which movie you want me to uncover the secrets of next. I read every single one, and who knows, your idea might be the star of the next video.